Who is the best player in the NBA and NBA history? Luka Doncic is easily the most versatile basketball player the world has ever seen. No player has led a European team and voted league MVP as well as Final Four MVP before moving on to lead a title contending team in the NBA to an NBA championship. In a few short weeks, we might witness the first player to ever do it. Could this form the foundation for Luka Doncic becoming the greatest player in NBA history? Hey, what's happening everyone? This is Swish Culture. While a number of NBA players have made the European transition and vice versa and played at a high level, there are a few key differences that make what Luka is doing absolutely special. It's almost certain that Luka Doncic will be inducted into the FIBA Hall of Fame once he's finished with his career, and if he wins the championship with this Mavericks team, who are dogs if you ask me, he's also easily an NBA Hall of Famer. While being both a FIBA and Naismith Hall of Famer doesn't automatically make you a better player than one who's only played in the NBA at a comparable level, there is more to Luka than just his versatility. Today's video will attempt to uncover what makes Luka such a special basketball player and what we might be witnessing moving forward over the next decade. Before that, however, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Swish Culture for the most analytical and entertaining NBA content on the planet. Now get ready. You're about to get Both the EuroLeague and NBA have changed a lot in the last 2 decades. As the NBA started recognizing the talent in European players, they started appearing a lot more often in ESPN mock drafts among the best talents available. While European players have been selected in the NBA for decades, their prominence has never been this great. What has defined European basketball for a very long time is that they've often successfully utilized former NBA players or undrafted players who find it difficult to carve out a path or simply find a role in the NBA. This gives the idea that the EuroLeague is a lot softer than the NBA and that in general, European players would struggle to cross over to the NBA. While there may be a small bit of merit to this, it isn't exactly true. A total of 560 international players have been drafted into the NBA, and while this includes players outside of both Europe and the US, for the intents and purposes of the video, we'll treat all international players as an external entity, seeing that they spent most of their early years competing against unknown competition. This is typically the basis of the NBA evaluation of international players, which has actually made it quite difficult to evaluate certain prospects and why you had such colossal draft busts as Darko Milicic and colossal draft booms such as Manu Ginobili. So for the last 55 years and following the explosion of European players coming to the NBA since the year 2000, teams have been better able to scout international prospects and seem to have settled within a range where international prospects account for between 25% and 50% of the total number of draft prospects selected each year. Throughout the growth period from 1970 to 2000, only a few European players really stood out. Neither of these players, however, have been inducted into the EuroLeague equivalent of the Naismith Hall of Fame, the EuroLeague Legend Award, an iconic award that Luka has a very good chance of achieving that would only be solidified if he decides to play a few years in Europe following a successful NBA career. This successful career would be driven by what makes Luka the best player currently in the NBA, and it's not even close. The two most successful players that have crossed over from the EuroLeague to the NBA are Toni Kukoc and Arvydas Sabonis. Both players have achieved significant stature in both leagues. As such, they've both been recognized in the NBA as well as FIBA, the internationally recognized basketball federation. As great a talent as Dirk Nowitzki was in the NBA, he just wasn't good enough to win at the same level as the two I mentioned before him. So how is this possible if the NBA is a tougher league? First off, more than a tougher league, it's a different league. The play styles are very different, with the NBA being faster and more athletic with more spacing. The EuroLeague is a bit more team-oriented and relies on the overall team talent instead of one or two players. Secondly, while Sabonis was initially drafted in the 1985 NBA draft, he didn't actually play in the NBA for another 11 years. Due to his age at the time, being under 21, he was not allowed to be drafted, so the selection was voided. He was drafted the following year, but again, this was around the era of the Cold War between the US and Soviet Russia.
For the last pick of the first round of the NBA draft, America's game, the Portland Trailblazers select Arvydas Sabonis of the Soviet Union.
So the USSR authorities didn't allow him to play in the US. He had been playing professionally since 1981, however, and so had a full 15 years of experience in the EuroLeague before he eventually played for the Blazers. While in Europe, he earned a number of MVPs as well as individual stat awards, which propelled him towards international recognition. When he did finally play in the US after the dissolution of the USSR, he averaged 12, 7, and 2 in points, rebounds, and assists. However, most wondered just how good he could have been if he played in the NBA during his prime, as he was already 30 when he started playing. His extended run in the EuroLeague gave him a huge advantage compared to your average NBA player heading to Europe once they fall out of free agency talks. Kukoc, on the other hand, played less years in Europe before transitioning to the NBA. He was drafted with the 29th overall pick in 1990, but continued to play in Europe. Between 1989 and 1993, he won multiple EuroLeague Final Four MVPs, 3 EuroLeague championships in 3 years, and a number of other accolades, all by the time he turned 25. After this, he played in the NBA for the Bulls, where he again won multiple championships alongside Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman, and Steve Kerr. Now, while this was a potent team without Kukoc, the big man at 6'11", shooting threes and averaging 13, 4, and 4 in those championship years was a significant contribution to the team. These two players alongside Dirk have contributed the most between the EuroLeague and the NBA. However, there's a new kid on the block. Luka Doncic became the youngest player to ever win the EuroLeague MVP and the Final Four MVP, and to top it off, he did this while leading his team to a EuroLeague championship. At just 18 years old, this was 4 years younger than Kukoc, who did the same feat at 22. Sabonis accomplished Final Four MVP at 31, but didn't get a regular season MVP until he was 40 years old, which is still pretty impressive. Doncic was able to accomplish both at 18 and be ready in time to be drafted into the NBA. This set the stage for Luka because having accomplished these so early, he becomes an icon in the EuroLeague and still has an entire NBA career ahead of him. Now Luka gets drafted to the Dallas Mavericks and without question became the best player in the 2018 NBA draft class. The two players picked ahead of him, DeAndre Ayton and Marvin Bagley III, have turned out to be busts compared to the talent that Luka brings to the table. While Bagley is trying to revive his career with the Wizards, Ayton is trying to keep his afloat with the Blazers, while not really doing much on the court to earn the millions he thinks he's worth. Luka's first season with the Mavericks was Dirk Nowitzki's last and would be one of 2 times during Luka's 6-year tenure that the Mavs would miss the playoffs, the other year being the season they acquired Kyrie Irving. Prior to that, however, as a sophomore in the league, Luka became an all-star for the first time after a rookie year snub and led the Mavs to a showdown against the LA Clippers during the first round of the Western Conference playoffs, taking Kawhi and Paul George to 6 games. During that series, Luka put up 31 points, 9.8 rebounds, and 8.7 assists with a 42-point game for his playoff debut, the current NBA record. Not to be outdone by his own record, Doncic managed to put up a ridiculous 43, 17, and 13 stat line, a 43-point triple-double, and leading the Mavs to a mind-blowing game-point overtime win on a deep step-back 3 that announced to the entire world that Luka Doncic is really that dude. The Mavs lost that series, but if Mark Cuban didn't know how talented of a player Luka was before, he knew now. The Mavericks would do their best to add talent around Luka, gave him exceptionally talented Hall of Famer point guard as a coach in Jason Kidd, a running mate in Kristaps Porzingis, but quickly switched it up when it was apparent things were not going to work. Instead of the two working together, KP couldn't fit himself alongside Luka and even admitted that in some ways he may have sabotaged the team because he couldn't do what he wanted.
At that point still I was a little bit young and I was like doing it, how you say, like out of spite, like, oh, on purpose I will not move from this corner.
Subsequently shipped out in the middle of 2022, a year that saw Luka make the Western Conference Finals for the first time. Unfortunately for Luka, he ran into Steph Curry, who was simply unguardable that year. The Warriors went on to win the championship after beating the Celtics in 6 games. The Mavericks retooled with Kyrie Irving, and 2 years later, they are about to go up against the Boston Celtics in the championship battle that would have been a repeat of 2 years ago had they beaten the Warriors. After a revenge series against the Clippers where Luka likely broke up Paul George and Kawhi Leonard for good, the Mavs then knocked off the #1 seed in OKC. OKC, being the youngest team to ever win a playoff series on an historic run, had just swept the Pelicans and looked like they could give Dallas more than their money's worth. In the end, however, Luka was just too much. Adding a bit of help from Kyrie, and the Mavericks seem unbeatable. They take down the Minnesota Timberwolves, who seemed primed to take the title after beating last year's champions, the Denver Nuggets. Considering Boston's record for showing up when it matters most, the Dallas Mavericks have a very good shot at winning this year's title, and in doing so, Luka Doncic will have achieved legendary status. A lot of people were clowning the fit between these two players. However, the similarities between Luka and LeBron were obvious. If Kyrie could make it work with LeBron, he was definitely going to make it work with Luka. Now you start seeing the importance of team chemistry. This team, led by these same two players, only won 38 games the year prior. However, with a bit of chemistry and some added pieces, they are on the cusp of winning a title. If you want to compare Luka to some of the greatest players to ever have done it, it doesn't hurt to start with LeBron. While LeBron won a title with a 24-year-old Kyrie Irving averaging 25 points per game, Luka might get the job done with a 32-year-old Kyrie averaging 23. Now for more context, LeBron won his first title at 27 with the Miami Heat super team. No one, not one analyst, would consider this year's Dallas Mavericks to be a super team. As a matter of fact, Kyrie didn't even make the All-Star team this year, although he was an All-Star 2 of the years he played alongside LeBron, with LeBron failing to win a title both years. Luka currently owns career stats of 28.7 points, 8.7 assists, and 8.3 rebounds per game up to this point, with 45 playoff games under his belt and at least 4 more games to add to that, as well as a Western Conference Finals trophy. At age 25, LeBron was averaging 27.8 points, 7.1 rebounds, and 6.8 assists, trailing Luka in all 3 categories. Luka gets the edge here on LeBron. A win in the NBA Finals would put Luka Doncic clear of LeBron James in terms of ranking at the same age. This means, without question, that Doncic would be the best player in the league. Being successfully compared to LeBron means only one thing. How does Luka fare against Michael Jordan? In terms of overall greatness, it's obviously a work in progress. However, in terms of their accomplishments, MJ was an all-star his first year in the league. The caveat here is that he was already 21, 2 years older than both LeBron and Luka when he came into the league. Prior to drafting Jordan, the Bulls failed to make the playoffs 3 years in a row. After drafting him, they made the playoffs every single year. Now all this can't be attributed to Jordan because when he left in the mid-90s, the team still made the playoffs without him. They did lose in the playoffs, however. Once Jordan started winning in 1991, he never lost a playoff series. Once he won the championship, he never lost an NBA Finals. Michael Jordan was on a whole other level when it came to winning and outperforming his peers. Stats-wise, considering the much lower scoring era of the 90s and the fact that Jordan was still averaging well over 30 points per game, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to compare. But Jordan was still averaging almost 33 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists per game for his career. The gap between MJ and LeBron is still quite cavernous, and there is some ground for Luka to make up to be considered the greatest player to ever play. But for now, he's clearly ahead of LeBron at this comparative stage in their careers. He might have a chance when it comes to approaching Jordan, however that's a lot of ground to make up for now. If Luka somehow manages to win this year's title and follow up with back-to-back appearances or titles, his Western Conference Finals appearances would certainly be worth more than any Eastern Conference Finals appearance. At the end of the day, what separates Jordan and Luka is Jordan's ability to win. If Luka can capture that, then we can have him in the same conversation as Michael Jordan, and in some instances, he might even be able to win. Let me know your thoughts on who you think is the best player in the NBA today and why it's Luka Doncic. Also, where do you rank a 25-year-old Jordan versus Luka versus LeBron, and who do you think will be the best player of all time when it's all said and done? Post your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all your notifications so you don't miss any of my latest uploads. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Swish!